So welcome everyone to our Missionaries of Justice and taking the time to be a part of this series, this session, and for those that registered, we are very happy to be able to host this event, which is going to be the first of hopefully about 5 or 6 series. My name is Rhoda Namboze. I am the Director of Development at Barefoot Law, and I'm also a lawyer by academic profession, or qualification rather. So I am very excited that we are hosting this event, a chance to be able to talk not only to legal professionals and justice actors, but also professionals from all across the board about how we can embrace empathy and why it's important to embrace empathy, because I think in everything that we do, in every human interactions, we need to be able to appreciate and understand where the other person is coming from. So I'm very happy that we are able to have this happen. And I want to specifically thank Barefoot Law and Strathmore University for making this happen. And we are joined by Gerald Abila, who is the Executive Director at Barefoot Law. And we were supposed to have also Mr. Alan Mukuki, who is the Director of International Partnerships at Strathmore Law School, Kenya. But due to technical difficulties, we unfortunately, he was not able to join us, but we know he's with us in spirit. And I'm going to ask that Mr. Gerald Abila will give some brief introductions and then also introduce our honorable and esteemed guest speaker, Dr. Willy Muntunga, to take us through today's session and what led up to it, what it was inspired by. And I'm hoping that at least one of the biggest takeaways that we will have from today's webinar is that you will leave it being more determined to embrace and want to understand the individuals that you interact with on a daily basis, and give you the zeal or morale to want to improve yourselves in your different professions as we continue to interact with each other. So I'm going to hand over to Mr. Gerald Abila. Please introduce Barefoot Law, introduce Strathmore University as well, and introduce the webinar series and how it came to be. And then ultimately I will ask you to do the honors of introducing our honored guest, Honorable Dr. Willy Muntunga. Gerald.
Thank you, Rhoda. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Gerald Abila. I'm the Executive Director of Barefoot Law. I'd like to thank you all for attending and sparing your precious time to join this webinar. It's part of a series of 5 webinars between Barefoot Law and Strathmore. Last year, we signed an agreement, an MOU with Strathmore University to advance law and legal research, legal innovation, legal technology, student internships and exchange programs, specifically to get law from the past into the future. And you'll see, as we'll be sharing from the series, a lot of the talks we will be having will be around law, tech, innovation. But while we realize for many of these discussions, we focus on the tools of delivery of the law, we very few times focus on ourselves as people and what makes us successful. Because of the COVID situation, a lot of us are starting to deliver our services using technology. This is good in that services continue, But the unintended consequence is that it creates a divide. There's the digital divide between us and those that we serve, but there's also the divide between us and the beneficiaries of our services. Everyone is reduced to zeros and ones. Everyone is reduced to a screen. What does this mean for you as a lawyer? What skills do you need to still keep serving in these times? And that's where empathy comes in. The world is unjust. 5.1 billion people have legal problems or justice needs, and of those 1.5 billion do not have solutions to these justice needs. But this calls for a new way of thinking, a new way of us to do law. And in today's webinar, and in the series of the webinars we'll be sharing with you, you will come to see that a lot of what we need are human skills. And for today's focus, we'll be discussing empathy. At Barefoot Law, we say the ultimate law is humanity, and there is no greater skill towards achieving that than empathy. And I could not think of anyone better to talk about this than the former Chief Judge and President of the Supreme Court of Kenya, Dr. Willy Muntunga. I remember the first time we met and talked about this topic was in Rome at a dinner table where you were discussing your experiences in the judiciary. And one thing that caught me was one of the most important skills you mentioned that enabled you succeed, not only during your time in the judiciary, but in life, was empathy. I found that very intriguing because it resonated a lot with me, and I thought it would be good for everyone else to hear it and leading up to this webinar. Simply put, Will is one of the wisest men I've met. I can't put it any better. We're all very familiar with his works, but when it comes to wisdom, there are two wise men I know, Willy and my dad. And with those few words, I'd like to hand over back to Rhoda, and hopefully Alan will be joining us in the course of this interaction. Thank you, Rhoda.
Thank you very much, Gerald. I was actually hoping that Honorable would go next immediately into his session, because I cannot introduce you. I think, Gerald, you've done a very, very, very brilliant job, and I'm going to request Dr. Willy that you take us through the session. Thank you.
Okay, you can hear me, right? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for this invitation. And I want to start with the metaphors that we're actually dealing with here: barefoot, missionaries for justice, and empathy. Okay, let me first of all say what I think empathy is. I think Gerald has mentioned one component of it is our humanity. Okay, it is our struggle for humanity and the human dignity of our fellow, human beings. And being a missionary of justice means you feel the pain of injustice, of inhumanity and oppression, and you are determined to struggle to bring an end to your pain and that of others. It's of course a continuous struggle with the progression and the regression. And I also going to say that empathy is fundamentally political. And for lawyers and human rights defenders, we have to be students of psychologists, psychiatrists, theologians, and other disciplines that have dealt in depth with this issue of empathy. So the metaphors, barefoot, missionaries, justice, are are indeed apt for this discussion. They both reflect deep empathy for ordinary people. We associate, all of us, barefoot with poverty, inequality, exploitation, oppression, hunger, thirst, and other societal inequities. And we have an idea who missionaries are. For me, I start with the traditional ones, because every religion, traditional religion, has its missionaries. Of course, the British call them witch doctors and other things, but we know different. And we know also the history of Western missionaries, starting with the explorers like Livingstone, Redman, Craft in the 19th century. All right, but the religions now, the missionaries that we talk of today, you know, we think of the imam, we think of the pastor, we think of the priests, and it's, you know, the missionaries are institutionalized. Growing up in the 50s, I remember one old man who walked all over the district where I come from, preaching. His church was the Church Missionary Society. And in my, child's mind, I related that person to Jesus Christ because of his works and, of his, preaching. And as churches and mosques, of course, became institutionalized, one of the things that I noticed was very, very important was that pastors, priests, and imams stayed with their flock. Okay, they were there, with the people who they led, and being, with their flock at all times reflected empathy. So when we talk about us being missionaries of justice, we, of course, that's where the metaphor takes us. If you're a human rights and social justice organization like Barefoot, you earn that title if you start your office. You open an office at Wandeja. Isn't it called Wandeja near Kampala, the place near Makerere University? Wandeja, isn't it?
Yes, Wandeja.
Yeah, Wandeja. So you open an office there because that's where the Bayayas are. And, you are on your way to, meriting the title of missionary for human rights and social justice. And just before we started this seminar, Rhoda was telling me that during the lockdown, she has learned how to knit, and Gerald has become a budding capitalist in terms of carpentry. So even the choice of what people have been doing, I think during this lockdown, it's also a reflection of empathies. But the fundamental question that I think is important when we use these terms, missionaries for justice, is, who are our role models as missionaries? Okay. I've been in many religions myself. Both Jesus and Muhammad are my role models because I see them as revolutionaries. I see them as socialists. I see them as people who loved the ordinary people, in the preaching in their organizations. And Muhammad, of course, fought battles to basically pop up his religion. And I say that because we have missionaries now, who are, just devil's disciples. the so-called prosperity gospel, where you have con men and women basically enriching themselves, at the expense of, poor people. So even the word missionary itself is a word that has to be historicized and problematized, so that if you are asked whose missionary of justice are you, okay, you can actually say you're missionary for social justice and human rights of ordinary people. And I think that's very, very important, because if you are in the other group of prosperity gospel and the other thugs that commit so many sins in the name of Christ, then the metaphor has a very, very, very negative impact to it. I also wanted to say that all of us can actually think through our development of empathy. And that's what I was talking to Gerard about. In my case, I think it's a community that I grew in the 50s. That's where I got my empathy from, because I saw people who loved children. Every child was a child of the community. I saw rich people who shared their wealth with the poor people. I saw communal grazing. I saw communal watering, and people, sharing sadness and happiness. There were only 5 rich people in my village, but during Christmas they would slaughter, cows, and people, the entire village, will be there. And so I could, growing up, I learned how, as a child, to help the poor, anybody who is blind, anybody who is old, because that was expected. And of course, my community or my village is not what it is now. It has a lot of gates. It has a lot of middle-class guys who don't have that empathy, because they grew up, in a different context and social conditioning. So everybody has that. A lot of human rights advocates I've talked to, they will tell you where their empathy comes from. Maybe it's somebody who was raped, and because of that, decided that there shouldn't be any rapes, and they became anti-rape, crusaders, people who have gone to prison, people who have experiences where they basically become missionaries for those causes. And it's important for, every lawyer, every human rights activist, every social justice defender to basically, pause and find out where the empathy started from. And you invariably find that when you went to universities, your intellectual, ideological and political development was also a reflection of, that communal empathy that you developed, as a kid. And if people don't have it, of course, they can always find how to deal with, that, particular issue. I was in prison for 16 months, and I thought I hated the warders, but after a while I realized that they were just prisoners like me. It's just that they were uniformed, in the hot prisons they were sweating more than me because they had to wear boots and other things. And out of prison, I realized that countries are prisons, not just where people who go into prison themselves, but they are countries that are just prisons. I wanted to bring in the notion of empathy and politics, because I think that's important. That's very, very, very important, because like during this pandemic, have we empathized with the ordinary people? Because I don't know about Uganda, but in Kenya, our leaders have been telling people, wash your hands with soap, and the people have been saying, but we don't have water, we don't even have soap. Buy masks. People will say we don't have money to buy masks because the money we have is for food. And this debate, has gone on in Nairobi. Probably you heard that during the pandemic, the government demolished houses in 2 places, in Nairobi. It was also raining. And so we cannot talk about empathy in a vacuum. If we are talking about empathy for ordinary people, feeling their pain and their injustice, then those who cause that pain and injustice become our enemies. And that's a politics of it. That's a politics of it. I think we are ruled by people who hate us. How do you explain a situation where you lock down people and you don't, as a government, say where the resources are for food? Okay, where you allow cartels to be selling water when actually you can give water to the slums so that people can wash their hands, and you can distribute soaps and so forth. Of course, there are the few people who are charitable, but charity cannot solve those problems. Problems are solved with our national resources, and that's how resources should be used, for that purpose. In our case, again, bad politics. The curfew was enforced through police brutality. More people were killed by police than the COVID, 19. So it's important that as lawyers and others who are who empathize with poor people to take politics very, very seriously and extend it to regional and global spheres. Okay, we cannot talk about empathy in Uganda and forget Kenya, Tanzania, South Sudan, Africa, and the rest of the world. Black Lives Matter has become a big thing. So I think that's why when you read the works of great revolutionaries, whether it's Che Guevara or Lenin or Mao Zedong and others, Amilcar Cabral, or whether it's Thomas Sankara, whether it's Nyerere or Nkrumah, you find this issue of empathy and the love for people that we rule very, very, very basic. It's very, very, very basic, because the opposite of that revolutionary love and empathy and humanity is what we've seen our governments do, during this particular period. And I think it's politics, to make sure that these countries don't go back to the normality that was there, which was the normality of unemployment, normality of poverty, hunger, thirst. This was an opportunity for governments to make the baby steps to show that they really cared about people, but they didn't do it. So in conclusion, I just want to say that those who have empathy for ordinary people must struggle, for a just, free, peaceful, non-militaristic, ecologically safe, prosperous and equitable societies in the planet. Okay, that's a basic for me. It's a vision for a new world, new planet, new politics, and this is a time to to think about it, because we have since 1918, over a century now, we have learned lessons under capitalism and socialism. And our quest, for a new world can, learn from those particular lessons. You look at the socialism in the Soviet Union, China, Cuba, Vietnam, and other places, and you say, was this socialism? What happened? What good lessons do we draw from it? I personally think that there are no lessons to draw from capitalism other than bombings, death, inequalities, and everything that we want to change. So I ended up with that aspect of politics and empathy, because I think it's important for young people to know that if you have empathy for ordinary people, that is a political statement. If you're a lawyer or human rights activist, then you have to see yourself as a missionary with a cause, okay, and not the missionaries that have a cause of enriching themselves and dividing people, because the combination between the politicians and the religion really bothers me, and that's why during this period, and this is the last thing I'm going to say, I've been working very hard to start my own religion, thinking through it, because I realize that is a very powerful institution, but it's never challenged. The mainstream narratives are rarely challenged. All right. So I even have a name for it. Heaven or hell on earth. So I want to put that question in that particular shrine, multi-denominational shrine, where the Muslims, the Christians, and other people can come and talk about that issue, heaven or earth, heaven or hell, on earth. And I have more faith, faith under that shrine. Of course, I don't want to say that there's money in it, because again, it's a question of empathy. We are not going there to make money. We are going there to come up with these, counter narratives. And that's something that out of the virus has made me very, very happy. I'm still thinking through about it, and once it's ready, I'll probably ask Barefoot Law to have a seminar where I can launch it for the entire East African region. Thank you very much. I'm done, Rhoda. I can't hear you.
I was on mute. Thank you. Yes. Okay. Yeah, my mind is racing, and I'm sure all our attendees as well are eager to dig deeper into this, and I'm excited about the possibility of Barefoot Law publishing your thoughts once you've put them down together. And so I just wanted to invite our attendees. I made an announcement on the chat feature. It's on the top right corner of your screens. Just please send in any questions that you have, any discussion areas that you would like discussed, and as a moderator, I will be sending them through. But as we wait for that, Dr. Willy, I love this idea of empathy and politics, and the example that you gave of how governments were dealing with the lockdown situation. My mom was actually in Mombasa when they tried to begin the lockdown process, and there was videos and pictures of police essentially beating down people at the ferry because they're not abiding by curfew rules and all these new measures that are so foreign to everyone, and without any regard to how to slowly kind of wane people into this kind of new normal reality, and so it got me thinking, how do you think we can have empathy kind of show up in our different laws, our different areas of practice? Because we're here talking about essentially how we as professionals can embrace empathy. So I'm wondering how then can empathy be ingrained in our laws, our doctrines, how our governments, how we can even get our governments to start talking about empathy. How do we get that conversation rolling? How do you think we can do it?
Yeah, that's a great question. For Kenya, we have a very progressive constitution that reflects those values. Okay, values of empathy. It's in the constitution. It's a question of implementation, and the Kenyan lawyers did very well on that issue of police brutality, because the public interest litigation here is as robust as in Uganda. So people have challenged those regulations through public interest litigation, and there've been a lot of activism, around the government regulations, which are actually, unconstitutional and inhuman. So I think for lawyers and the human rights activists in Kenya, they've done a lot in terms of condemning these atrocities and going to court to get orders to stop some of these violations. And I guess when we were pushing for a new constitution in Kenya, that's something we had in mind. We had in mind that it will mitigate the harshness of what happens. But we have learned that constitution making and getting a progressive constitution is not the be-all and end-all. The implementation becomes very, very important. In the case of Kenya, one of my friends told me that our constitution is a beautiful baby. The country birthed a very beautiful baby, but we handed the baby to child traffickers, to take care of. So again, a good constitution requires also a political leadership that is committed to implementing it. The Kenyan constitution has values of equity, equality, human dignity, inclusiveness. They're very well, stated in the constitutions. But when it comes to implementation, you have a leadership that just closed down, those values that collectively, define our humanity and empathy for ordinary people. So I think lawyers, as usual, have a role to play. public interest litigators, activists who organize, demonstrations and resistance, to, those particular, violations. And also in political terms, I noticed in Kenya, and I think in Uganda and Tanzania, I noticed young people who are sick and tired of the status quo, all right? And, they are organizing to contest for political power, all right? Of course, we've got to know what Bobby Wine, stands for, what the parties in Tanzania stand for, opposition, political parties, and so forth. Because an alternative political leadership has to be very different from what we have, and it's a tough call. But I think for young people, that is what you have to think through, because we are facing now imperialism of the West and East, right? Like in the case of Kenya. And we don't even know that we own this country. We might just wake up tomorrow and we are told that we should move in the next 48 hours because the country belongs to IMF, World Bank, Europe, Japan, or whoever. And these guys are just borrowing. We don't know. So it's important for young people to start thinking very, very seriously that even if you struggle for a new constitution, the implementation requires a political leadership that is going to implement it and make sure that the ordinary people. It's a question of resources. Why should we have, like Kenya has, 8,300 people who own assets equal to the rest of us? 8,300. In terms of land, in terms of companies, in terms of whatever they have, their assets and their worth equals what the rest of us have, and we have, I guess, now about 47 million. So that stark inequality is something that is not sustainable and is not acceptable. And if people start talking, as the young people in Kenya are talking about now, revolution, okay? No, they are not saying it's going to be violent or anything, but they are talking about fundamental changes, which are very, very, very important, going forward.
Thank you so much for that. I think it was a very, very well said. So I'm going to share 3 questions that have come in from the chat, and we can dissect them. One is from Wambui. She asks, as a judicial officer, how do you incorporate empathy in your judgments, bearing in mind that the criminal system, as it currently stands, is so bent on retribution? That's one. Mm-hmm. Secondly, from Wilson Macharia, how do we delineate empathy from sympathy, especially when advocating for the rights of vulnerable persons, such as persons with disabilities? So how do we create that distinction? And thirdly, from Anonymous, similar to the missionaries of old, as we lawyers face a lot of hostility from the government and its policies in our pursuit for justice, how do you advise lawyers to go out seeking justice with this hostility and persecution from the same system and the same individuals that we are trying to serve?
Okay, I'll start with Anonymous, who has also showed no empathy by not saying who they are, but I'm sure they have good reasons for doing so. I understand where he's coming from, the struggles for change, are very dangerous. When you look at the Ugandan situation or Kenya situation, movements of lawyers for change, and it's happening in Malawi, where lawyers and ordinary people, marched, and they might probably have brought an end to that, dictatorship. So it's also a cause, because if you believe in a particular cause, and you are a lawyer, and you want to get involved in changes and resisting dictatorships and so forth, that's you just have to join with others. And the lawyers are organized under a law society. So the leadership of that law society becomes very, very, very critical, in my view. It can help in public interest litigation. It can protect lawyers, from harm, as long as they collectively, work for the, national interest. But as it happens, some people will become martyrs in those kind of struggles, and that's a price to pay, for it. But I would basically say the organization that we have, particularly the lawyers are very well organized, and some of the oppressors are their clients. They can, have dialogue with them and so forth. So they're very influential people, in my view. And their law society, the law society of Uganda, should be the one which is protecting these young lawyers from attacks, and and make sure that if they are taken to court, they have lawyers to defend them. Yeah, I think this Wilson saying the empathy and is a good question, but I don't have an answer, about. I guess both are definitely values, but I've always, in my discussion, I've shown that empathy is a concept that is. Empathy for ordinary people is a broader concept, but I'm not really sure. Maybe somebody else can answer that. And the Wambui, I think that judicial discretion is actually that ingredient where judicial officers can show empathy, right? Because invariably, sometimes the magistrate has a discretion as to whether they will send you to jail for a custodial sentence, or fine you, or even request a probationary report. That they have that, they have that discretion. And they can use it to show, that although a crime has been committed, why would I jail somebody who has stolen a mango and eaten it for what, 6 months or whatever? What for? It's, if you have that discretion, you can just let them go and tell them never to do it again. That's why prisons are full of poor young people, because the sentencing system is also harsh, and it lacks empathy. And I also think that, and this is something I've written a lot about, what I call judicial politics. Because unless those judicial politics are defined, invariably judges will not even address the question of empathy. They will never deal with it. because every judiciary in Africa now is at a crossroads. Okay, you either support the status quo and its oppression and what it does to people, or you seek to get the confidence of the people in these institutions. And one way of doing it, and we did that in Nairobi, is to come up with sentencing and also bond guidelines so that people are not, locked up. But the other day I was reading of some people who have been charged and they are being told to pay 500 million, 300 million. 500,000 shillings is a lot for somebody who is, not employed. And yet the law says the judge or the magistrate has to decide whether the person will attend trial. So why not call the person's parents or the chief or somebody to ask whether this person will, will attend trial? So there is a lot of judicial discretion that is used for anti-people, pursuits, because people are second guessing their leaders. Okay, and so even as I talked about implementation of the Constitution, even the judicial officers, the judges, and the judiciaries themselves have to ask themselves that question: what exactly do they have empathy for the welfare of citizens, and when can they use discretion, to show it? In the case of Kenya, one of the great decisions I've read on the coronavirus came from a judge of the High Court who. Two doctors went to court and said that there was a Chinese plane that had landed in Nairobi with the 239 passengers, and that was actually in February from China to Kenya. And these doctors said those people have to be quarantined. And, the judge actually made a great decision. Apparently, the lawyers involved had given him sufficient help to know that those people have to be quarantined, and they have to be, their contacts have to be traced and so forth. And it was a good decision, but the Kenyan government did not even disobey the order. Because we later found out that these were Chinese businessmen who are just coming to sign contracts, and so they didn't want them quarantined and so forth. So the main question in Kenya now, and I'm sure you have followed it, is what do judiciaries do when the executive disobeys court orders? And disobeying court orders is actually subverting the Constitution and the rule of law. So will the lawyers take positions on that? With the judges, because judges have their own associations, what will they do? And so, in a nutshell, Wambui, everybody in our countries is engaging in the struggle, So you've got to pick your course. I don't see any political fences that people can sit on. They don't exist in East Africa. You're either on one side or the other. That's how it is. And I think it's important for lawyers who practice to realize that they have a lot in common with the human rights activists and social justice activists. They're pushing the same, same causes, because sometimes, judiciaries and bar associations tend to be, anti-activism. Okay, and for me, activism means that we are all activists. It depends on whose activists you are. I mean, if you are supporting the government, you are government activists. So why is it that it's only people who are supposed to challenge the government are the ones labeled activists? We are all activists, and even within the judiciary itself, judicial activism is for everybody, and that's where I think that we are headed. We're headed towards a situation where, just like the struggle for independence, there are no offenses, no political offenses to sit. You have to be with the oppressors or with those who are challenging oppression.
Thank you again for that. I think that was brilliantly well said as well. I think as we slowly wind down, I wanted to quickly ask you your views on this kind of new normal that we are currently in, where the judicial space has, or the justice sector has had to kind of innovate around the COVID-19 situation and the social distancing, and the growing use of virtual courts, virtual meetings, and essentially completely turning around the lawyer-client relationship setting or sphere where many of these involved physical interactions. And I was wondering how you think lawyers and justice actors and people in the justice space can still invoke empathy when you don't have that physical aspect, when there's a growing use of tech and innovation, and we're doing more virtually and online. And how do you think we and the growing the young professionals in the legal space can embody empathy and have that transcend in their work, and still stay true to the embracing of empathy with essentially the physical barrier that is technology or the internet?
Yeah, I think what Barefoot Law does, which is seeing technology as an enabler for justice, all right? Because we are talking about justice here. So, using technology as an enabler for justice will, of course, you will have to deal with those challenges, isn't it? Because technology has made these steps, and we're not going back. Okay, there will be cases where somebody is in Arua and they can use technology instead of traveling to Uganda, to Kampala, which is for a hearing. That can be done, through technology. Of course, the question you ask about technology and empathy, is a great question, particularly when you realize that technology has come in this phase that is called, people have called it robotic capitalism, or they have called it surveillance capitalism. So there's politics in technology. Even if we use artificial intelligence to get our judges, all those issues we've been discussing about empathy, will come in my in my view, and if technology is going to be used as an enabler for justice, then the guidelines are very clear. They are not going to compromise our humanity. All right. If anything, they are going to to reinforce it, and that's what the people have known Barefoot, Strathmore, and others, and also the Hill at Den Haag. it's actually using, you know, technology for the things that we are talking about, not for inhumanity, etc., or surveillance that is used to hurt people, and that's what we have to, you know, to look out for, because public interest litigation has to deal with surveillance, you know, and the robotic capitalism and the bad effects of it, so that people go to court actually against, you know, the misuse of, you know, technology. But I think I think it's in Den Haag where somebody said that the people in Emirates, they said they will have artificial judges and the courts in Mars in 100 years. And I asked that guy, you know, suppose you are closed down by the Americans, how will you have one there? But I see a case for and against, you know, technology, and that is the politics of it. There's a lot that the digital revolution has brought in that is very negative and very, very, very dangerous. So going forward, as lawyers and as we have to humanize, you know, technology. We cannot allow it. We cannot allow it to be anything else than that, because it can be captured by the same forces. Look at elections when you have algorithms where we vote religiously during the day, and the intelligent people can't count because they are not interested in counting. They use algorithms to steal the election. And so even this issue of voting for me doesn't make sense anymore, because if there's going to be not only politics of divisions, but also you know, PR, whatever, this Cambridge Analytica, artificial intelligence and whatnot, were just being used to steal elections. We just have to think how that is going to play out, because technology is actually in various areas where there are gross injustices. All right. So I guess, you know, the struggle will continue, and we have great opportunities now because these developments weren't going to happen before, you know, if coronavirus didn't happen. It has now happened. And we just have to think through the lessons and make sure that we don't allow technology to dehumanize, you know, our judicial systems, our legal systems, and that they used the way you are using it at BarefootLaw, you know, as enabler for justice. So we are done, right? 1 hour is up.
Yes, we have hit the 1 hour mark, and unfortunately, we cannot take any more questions. But thank you so much, Honorable Dr. Willy, for taking the time off to share this with us. And I am so incredibly excited, and I'm hoping that we can have you back again soon to talk more about this and spend a bit more time on it. And there are also some other questions that came in. But yes, thank you so much for being a part of this series.
You can email those questions, because I'll send you a revised paper. I had written this paper, so I can send it, and you can, you know, there are some things I didn't put in, but with the question I can improve it and send it to you guys to dispute.
Okay, that would be perfect, and I'm sure all the people that registered and asked for this would be delighted. So thank you very much, and thank you everyone that registered, and thank you to everyone that was able to attend and took the time to be a part of this. Asanteni sana, and I hope and pray that we will continue to internalize everything that you have heard today, and Dr. Willy, as we work towards a future that is truly just and empathetic. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah, I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So you